I'll caveat up front that the concept I'm going to discuss in this video is odd. I'm not saying it's flat out likely necessarily, but I think it's at least worth exploring and giving some consideration to. So first, a brief bit of background, which I've talked around in other content, but I think deserves a more pressing focus here. Nintendo has a history of testing out new gameplay mechanics in mainline Mario and then farming them out to other characters. Yoshi's Island, Wario Land, and now Donkey Kong Bonanza all built heavily off Mario Universe concepts. And this makes perfect sense if you think about the design process of these games. Mario needs to be innovative and delightful and surprising and involves the absolute cream of the crop developers trying to absolutely perfect something. But that's an expensive development investment, and if you can recycle those gameplay mechanics into something new with separate legs, then it's self-evidently a cost-effective approach. And note Shuntaro Furukawa's recent comments about how they're thinking about how to ameliorate long development times. Now, my personal hobby horse is that they should do a Mario Sunshine game with Princess Daisy as the lead, which in effect would be the same as the way Super Mario Odyssey was repurposed into Donkey Kong Bonanza, except the flood mechanic is so well developed, you wouldn't need a new mechanic such as the destruction concept at the core because you just have Daisy wear flood. Instantly, a fairly forgettable and minor character would become immensely more valuable to Nintendo, and this would multiply up the value of everything else she's involved in. And because it's a Mario Universe character, they have a leg up on a new franchise that they can continue long into the future. And it doesn't have to be Daisy. It could just as easily be Peach or Diddy Kong or Cow or even Waluigi if they wanted to make it a kind of inverse Luigi's Mansion title. But I think Daisy feels like a good fit, if only because a Daisy feels quite sunshinish to start with. All of this I've talked around at various points before, however, this is just the background to what I want to discuss today. Because what I think should puzzle us is that there is a major gameplay mechanic that Nintendo have spent roughly 5 or 6 years building, and which they themselves have basically said they're going to throw away for the next installment of their series. And that is the Ultra Hand mechanics of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Hidemaru Fujibashi, the director of the game, has himself said that they probably won't reuse that and has even said he has an idea of what might come next. This is the absolute A-team of Nintendo blasting forward with something very different and brilliant, and good on them. But just like the Odyssey structure was an absolutely perfect shell in which to pour Donkey Kong and give the franchise a new lease of life, does this open up the possibility of Nintendo doing the same thing they did with Odyssey and Bonanza, but doing it with Tears of the Kingdom and something new? Could they take the shell of Tears of the Kingdom, reinterpret those mechanics through the lens of a completely different character and IP that they want to rejuvenate, and have a new title developed under the general supervision of EPT3, but with a broadly new group of developers leading the charge? Because while these mechanics were quite specific to Link in Tears of the Kingdom, what's clever about the way Bonanza worked is that they could take a structure of gameplay progression, which was evidently designed for Mario, and just by putting DK in the lead, it felt very different. It seems an eminently sensible way to stave off a sense of sequelitis if their sequels actually splice in a whole different character and world, essentially implanting the DNA of a dying franchise into a healthy host from a successful game structure. And of course, there are dozens of characters that could potentially step into Link's Pegasus boots. Sheik would make a load of sense as a way to continue the evolution of Zelda herself from the object of the series to its subject, something we've seen, of course, not just with Echoes of Wisdom, but also with the forthcoming Age of Imprisonment. Pikmin seems ideally placed to have object manipulation at the heart of its gameplay, and it would create a completely new type of Pikmin experience if you had this capability. Nintendo could even create a wholly new universe, an IP that might be the seed corn for the future, just as Splatoon and Animal Crossing once were. But I think there is one incredibly obvious candidate, and that candidate is Star Fox. Star Fox has stepped into Zelda-ish territory before, notably with Star Fox Adventures, and like Donkey Kong, it is a franchise which always seems like it has huge untapped potential, but which has never truly managed to keep its game series feeling relevant and modern over the long term. Bonanza wasn't just an updating of Donkey Kong, but in many ways it was a reinvention of it completely afresh, albeit infusing it with references and features from the best of the series from years gone by. Now, I don't mean that this would just be Fox running around a thinly veiled Hyrule stand-in, ultra-handing everything in sight. But think about it. The idea of Fox being able to travel from world to world and explore these vast areas is already exciting enough that you would naturally want some kind of open world exploration mechanics of the sort that the Zelda shell would cater for. What if Fox crash lands and needs to use his renamed Ultra Hand capabilities to stitch together machinery that will get him firstly around the planet he's on, and then from moon to moon, and then from planet to planet? The journey from planet to planet might have this rail shooter approach, which the series has always been famous for, but it would be on the device that you stitch together from spare parts, and so players would have the chance to rethink and redesign from world to world. Speedrunners could put together a few girders on a big rocket and have an Andros, while the more cautious among us could carefully ferret out resources and build a rocket that would make traversal all the easier and more satisfying. Now, immediately, some obvious criticisms of this idea come to mind. Firstly, the Zelda team are, by their nature, hugely iterative in their process. In Breath of the Wild, they had to force themselves to throw out the rulebook and think differently, but only because Ocarina of Time had become such a template that these conventions were starting to feel tired. Tears of the Kingdom is very much built in the shell of Breath of the Wild. It follows a lot of the same rhythms. And truth be told, all of that stuff could go into future Zeldas. The cooking mechanics, the shrines, the temples, and so on. Bonanza is not the same as Odyssey, even though it's clearly been built off the same scaffolding. An EPD3-led Star Fox game would feel very different from Tears of the Kingdom in just the same way, but the existence of a successful mechanic would instantly entice people who might not normally consider trying a Star Fox game to pick the title up. As for EPD3 capacity, well, I've covered in a past video the degree to which Donkey Kong Bonanza is a separate team from the core Odyssey group, even though the core Odyssey group were clearly heavily involved, at least in the early stages. As far as I can tell, it went a long way in development with the Odyssey crew, but then around 2020 they built a new team with a newly hired director to take it to the finish line. I rather doubt the exact same arrangement would happen with EPD3, but it seems completely plausible that a small group of people linked to EPD3 could, ho-ho, pilot a new vision for Star Fox and then team up with Bandai Namco or Monolith Soft or Eighting or just suck in internal EPD staff to bring the project to fruition. Recall also that DK was not Motokura's first thought necessarily, but that the senior producer Koizumi specifically asked for Donkey Kong as the lead of a game, and then from there the director concluded that the voxel destruction mechanic they had already created suited the Great Ape. If a senior figure were to request a Star Fox project in a similar way, there may well be off-the-shelf mechanics that haven't fitted other titles, but that may suit a new Star Fox. But it seems equally as plausible to me that they would see the potential in doing a dramatically different twist on a mechanic that has already shown such promise, even if it's already been used in an existing game. So, do I actually think EPD3 staff members will be involved in the next original Star Fox? Evidently the chances are low, but it has to be some group in EPD I'd have thought, and Zelda has a lot of people, so when you think about the options, EPD3 might not be all that mad. I think I'd be daring go to 30% on the basis that somebody from within EPD is going to be handling Star Fox, even if they're partnered with external studios, and I think other EPDs feel a much less compelling fit. There are partner studios at EPD, but these tend to handle franchises which are already up and running, Paper Mario, Fire Emblem and so on, not major rejuvenations of a potential sleeping giant franchise. EPD 8, famous of course for both Bonanza and the Mario series, have a lot on their plate already, and EPD 4 are more focused on casual and innovative concepts. EPD 5 already have Animal Crossing and Splatoon, and EPD 10 already have both 2D Mario and Pikmin. Mario Kart and ARMS developer EPD 9 are closest perhaps to that arcadey sensibility which characterised some of the Star Fox games, but if there's one group of superstar developers who might have a Bonanza type split, it's hard to see too far past the Zelda group. Is such a game in development? I mean, I'd have to say that I feel more confident than ever that something of serious scale with Star Fox must be on Nintendo's bingo cards. A year or two ago, I'd have been, and indeed was, in a previous video on the subject, more cautious because historically Nintendo has done the thing of a small release here or there to test the waters, maybe to try a spin-off of the size. But with the progressive drumbeat of new film announcements and the aggressiveness of Nintendo's move with making Donkey Kong Bonanza, even though Donkey Kong had had a mixed previous history in terms of maintaining a consistent lineup of new games, this all shows that Nintendo are willing to actively steer their developers towards needy franchises. And so I do think a big, bold, ultra ambitious take on Star Fox is more a matter of when than if, and I'd say 70% we could see something by the end of 2027 if they have been spending a significant amount of time planning this title. I mean, if we imagine that they do build off the Zelda mechanics, then if this was finalized around 2023, then 4 years on, 5 years on, would give us the potential to see a new Star Fox game coming pretty soon. I think they know Star Fox is a franchise with potential, and retrofitting Tears of the Kingdom mechanics may be just a relatively inexpensive way to save 2 or 3 years of a total development time and give us a huge attention-grabbing Fox Macau title that maybe, just maybe, will rocket the mammalian hotshot back to superstardom once again. Now, obviously, this specific idea is still a pretty long shot, but I still raise it as a possibility because I think it is one way that would make a lot of sense for the different situations Nintendo find itself with a fantastic franchise which is undercooked and a fantastic type of gameplay which, as of Tears of the Kingdom, seems like it might be destined for the scrap heap. For my previous thoughts on Star Fox, do check out the video on screen, and as ever, thank you to everyone watching, and particularly the Patreon members who help keep this channel going. I shall look forward to seeing you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.